Hello, I am Erin Lenz. I am a licensed and certified teacher in the state of Iowa. I received my bachelor's degree from Briarcliff College and my master's of arts in teaching and curriculum and instruction from the University of St. Mary. I am also a mother of a dyslexic. And there she is. So all of the information I'm going to talking about is going to be coming from the book Overcoming Dyslexia, written by Sally Shaywitz, MD. This is the second edition of her book. So let's start out with the definition and the history of dyslexia. The dictionary defines dyslexia as a variable, often familial, learning disability involving difficulties in acquiring and processing language that is typically manifested by a lack of proficiency in reading, spelling, and writing. But I think this is an easier definition to remember. It's a general term for a disorder that involves difficulty in learning to read or interpret words, letters, and other symbols, but that does not affect general intelligence. Now, back in 1871, Adolf Kusamol first used the term word blindness when he was discussing dyslexia. He defined it as trouble recognizing words with normal intelligence. And then in 1887, Professor Rudolf Berlin coined the term dyslexia. Dys meaning difficult, and lexis for word or reading. So, who is affected with dyslexia? There is a Connecticut longitudinal study that began in 1983. It included 24 elementary schools in Connecticut. They followed the kindergartners in those schools over the next 38 years. And what they found was 1 in 5 students, or 20% of them, have dyslexia. However, less than 1/3 of that 20% receives any services for their dyslexia. It also found that there are equal numbers of boys as girls that are affected with dyslexia. However, 3 times as many boys are identified than the girls. Now, dyslexia is not a vision problem. A lot of people think that dyslexia is seeing letters or words backwards. It's not a vision problem. It's a weakness with the phonological processing of sounds in the brain. Dyslexics have excellent higher order problem-solving skills, and they don't see those letters or words backwards or in reverse order. The issue is with manipulating the letters and the sounds. So, language, speaking, is natural. However, reading is not. Language is acquired naturally. Any neurologically healthy child will naturally learn to speak. However, reading is an acquired skill. Reading requires one to translate these lines and squiggles, we call them letters, into sounds, and then combine those sounds into words. And that is not natural. It does not come naturally to us. We have to be taught how to read. So let's talk about breaking the code. Words are broken up into phonemes. Those are the sounds of the words. Phonemic awareness is being aware that words can be broken into those sounds. Dyslexics, they require much more work to put the sounds to the letters than a non-dyslexic person does. Dyslexics use a different neural pathway to read. It is more laborious and it is slower. I will show you more about that here in just a few minutes. Being the fact that they use a different neural pathway benefits the dyslexics. It benefits them in their creativity and their being able to think outside of the box. All right, so phonological weakness is apparent in dyslexics in reading, but it can also affect their speech. A preschooler's phonological aptitude directly correlates to their reading ability 3 years later. If they receive sound-based training, instruction, it shows to provide the most improvement in reading and spelling for a dyslexic. For example, if I were to say, clip the middle sound, so you look at the picture rug and you choose which picture on the right-hand side, gum, bat, fan, or box also has the same middle sound as rug, you would then clip gum. Rug and gum both have as the middle sound. Now, dyslexics are known for misnaming objects, and it's not because of a lack of knowledge, but it's because of confusion of sounds in the language. They also have difficulty in word retrieval, which brings about a lot of ums coming from them. And it's also very difficult, or can be physically difficult, for them to actually form the word in their mouth. When my dyslexic was probably 6 or so, she was trying to say the word technically, and she could not get her mouth to form the word in the correct order. The dyslexics will also misspeak, meaning they'll say a word and they actually meant something else. Usually it sounds very similar to the word that they said. And like I said, a lot of times you'll get a lot of ums before they get to the word that they want to say. So what's the word? Tornado? No, I think you meant volcano. 2 different words sound a lot alike. All right, so a dyslexic's lack of phonological ability is not reflective of their intelligence. Most dyslexics are of at least average intelligence. Mine happens to be twice exceptional. She is, she has a high IQ, but she has dyslexia. Dyslexics have what Sally Shaywitz calls a sea of strengths. So in the middle is decoding, and that is where dyslexics struggle. However, they have these sea of strengths around their dyslexia. Things that include reasoning and concept formation. They grasp concepts very quickly. Their comprehension is usually fantastic if they hear it instead of having to read it themselves. Their critical thinking skills are excellent. They have high vocabularies. They're great at problem solving, and they have a lot of general knowledge. All right, we are going to now talk about the brain and reading. Research has shown that there is a neural signature for dyslexics. It's how the dyslexics use their brain when they read. It's present from the very start, and it never goes away. And it's the difference in the brain makeup, and it's apparent before reading instruction even begins. The core issue for dyslexics is phonologic. It's turning the print into sounds. Now, a non-impaired person, a person without dyslexia, uses the left back of their brain to read. Dyslexics use the right front and back as well as the left front. in order to read. And you can see there where it shows on the left side, it shows the non-impaired person, and you can see those 3 spots that are highlighted. For a dyslexic, you can see the 2 places on the right side of the brain as well as the place on the left, and those are the areas they use to read. Now, this works, however, it does function slower, and it's not automatic like it is for a non-dyslexic. It's slow and it's draining. It uses up an enormous amount of their attention. All right, so how about talking about diagnosing dyslexia? Now, getting a diagnosis helps put the pieces together of why reading is a struggle for some kids. And a failure to diagnose them can be detrimental to that dyslexic person. The scientific knowledge that comes with a diagnosis is reassuring. It's empowering. It tells them that they're not dumb, that there's not something wrong with them, that they just learn in a different way. They have a reading impairment, not a thinking impairment. And many, many dyslexics think that they're dumb when they're not. If your child is dyslexic, it'll impact them regardless if it's diagnosed or not. Not identifying the problem won't make it go away. Now, a diagnosis can reveal the true intelligence of the person, and we found this to be the case for our daughter because it showed us that she is in a gifted range for her intelligence, but her reading really struggles. And letting her know that she is not dumb was so very important for her. Now, a dyslexia diagnosis, it validates the disparity, the difference between their intelligence and their slow reading. They know, they don't think that they're dumb, but they see how hard and how slow their reading is, and then they start to question their own intelligence. IQ and reading ability, they're not linked at all. At all. An average reading should not be used to deny a dyslexia diagnosis. Any dyslexic who has average reading is putting forth a whole lot of effort to get that average reading scores. It's all about the manner, the ways in which they read. The way that a dyslexic reads, it's harder for them. The work that it's required for them to decipher written words is much slower, much more laborious. Now, even listening to your child speak can give you clues because many dyslexics have delays in speaking. They don't speak as early as others. They have difficulties in pronunciation. Like I was saying, my daughter had a difficult time trying to get the word technically out. Sometimes they'll omit beginning sounds. They may say pischetti for spaghetti. They may invert sounds and say aminal instead of animal. They might add a sound in, like saying vercation instead of vacation. And they also have difficulty in pronouncing unfamiliar or complicated words. Many dyslexics are less sensitive to rhyme. They may confuse rhyming with words that sound similar. So car and can instead of hat and bat. And if they're unable to rhyme by the age of 6, that should be a clue as well. And a lot of them use general words instead of specific ones because they have a hard time with that retrieval process. So they may say stuff or things instead of something specific. And they also have a very high listening vocabulary. talking with a dyslexic, they'll use words in speaking that they would never dream of using in their writing. A lot of times they'll use the incorrect phoneme like volcano and tornado, and they may have retrieval issues. Those ums can come out often. They will sometimes have difficulty in producing the word, but if you give them options, they can choose the right one. And that word retrieval again, and also difficulty in learning letter names and sounds. Now we're going to talk about the dyslexic reader. Now, the dyslexic reader is going to require more exposures to printed words. They are going to have to see the word more times than a non-dyslexic to put it in their internal lexicon. It takes longer for them to create those neural pathways for automaticity, to get that word firmly planted in their brain. Even after they learn how to decode, it takes them more time to do it. It takes them more time to decode new words. And they rely heavily on context clues. They can read easier in connected text than they can single words or word lists. However, when they're reading connected text, oftentimes the small function words are difficult or completely skipped altogether. The linkage between how the sound of a word and how it looks is imperfect, and that is because after a dyslexic person understands the word, understands the meaning of the word, they no longer attend or pay attention to how it looks. So as they're reading in connected text, once they figure out what that word is, they no longer look at the rest of the word to make sure that they know how it looks altogether. And a lot of times, and I see this often, it may seem like it's the first time they've ever seen the word, even if it's not. One of the most consistent things about dyslexics is their inconsistency. They may have a word, have read a word, understand a word, and then the next time you come to that word, it can be like they have never seen that word before in their lives. And it does make you stop and wonder. Now, for dyslexics, it's easier for them to read words that represent a concrete object than it is for them to read words that just convey an idea. And it's easier for them to be pulled into reading by relevant and meaningful text. That means that if you have a kid who likes baseball, it's going to be easier to pull them into reading something about baseball because they want to read about what they like. High interest texts are vital, and even the most severe dyslexics can learn to read. They can do it. Now, you may be sitting here listening and seeing these things and then comparing them to your own child or maybe a student's progress. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. You need to read with your child often so you can monitor their progress, so you can see where they are. When they're in first grade, ask yourself, are they trying to link letters to sounds, even if it's imperfect? Are they matching initial letter with its sound? S is for sun. By the end of first grade, are they matching all the letters in a word to the sounds in all positions of the word, at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end of a word? And are they recognizing word families? They should leave first grade reading. Continue to read with your child often, even after they're able to read on their own. In second grade, they should be beginning to read easy multiple syllable words. Animal, sleepy. As they are reading, Concern should arise if they're not sounding out unknown words. If they look at an unknown word and have no word attack skills, no way to try to decode that word, that is something that you should be concerned with. Or if they're guessing at words, and if they're unable to read new grade level words, all of those things should be concerning for you. And if they're not building a vocabulary of words that they can read fluently, that internal lexicon, they should be able to see many words and be able to read them without having to stop and decode them. And also, if they don't seem to enjoy reading, reading should be enjoyable by second grade. Now, most dyslexics aren't even identified until third grade. However, the ideal time to identify them is early elementary, because the earlier the interventions start, the better off they're going to be. Struggles, they're already there and present and detectable by first grade. Waiting is not acceptable. If you suspect dyslexia, don't wait. You need to act now. Now, if you do have a child who's third grade and above, here are some things that you need to know and think about. Dyslexia is noticed more in third grade and above because the focus now is not on learning to read, but on reading to learn. They will substitute words that make sense but are not correct. So if they're reading something and the word says automobile and they say car, that is a clue to you that they know what the meaning for that word is supposed to be, but they use a word that they're more familiar with. And then you need to pay attention to their prosody. Prosody is the rhythm of reading, and you can tell if the prosody for a child is smooth or if it's choppy. And if it's choppy, that should be concerning. Poor spelling is also often a sign of dyslexia. And a lot of dyslexics often have bad or poor handwriting. Things to look for: choppy oral reading, omitted or substituted or misspoken words when reading out loud. Okay, if you have a dyslexic, what can you do to help them? Now, the lack of fluency can cause significant issues for dyslexics as they become teens and in middle school and high school, as they have a higher volume of written work and reading for lots of different classes. And as I've said, reading for dyslexics is laborious, it's hard, and it depletes their attention reserves. So they may need to have frequent breaks as they are reading and working on the large volume of work required in middle school and high school. And background noise is a difficult distraction for dyslexics. Foreign language will often be difficult for dyslexics, and it actually causes them pain. Their self-esteem gets damaged. They're reluctant to attend school. They have stomach aches and headaches and all kinds of different ailments that make them not want to go to school. It creates moodiness and sometimes feelings of shame. And a lot of them work really, really hard to hide their dyslexia because they think that it makes them look stupid. Now, if you're wondering, should my child be evaluated for dyslexia? Well, can they outgrow this? Simply, no, they can't. You're born with it, and you live with it your whole entire life. 75% of students who are poor readers in third grade continue to be poor readers throughout their life. The time is precious. Time is a dyslexic's most precious commodity. The sooner they're evaluated, the sooner they get that diagnosis for dyslexia, the sooner they get accommodations or modifications, the better for them. You can get remediation sooner. It will preserve their self-esteem. Ideally, intervention should start no later than first grade, which is a real problem when most dyslexics aren't even identified until at least third grade. All right, so some clues to dyslexia in early childhood. In preschool, I said it before, I'll say it again, delayed language, trouble with nursery rhymes or rhyming. Do they know nursery rhymes? Do they play with words and things that rhyme? Do they find rhyming funny? If they don't, that's a sign. Do they mispronounce words? It may sound cute, but it's a clue. Once again, my kindergartner says vercation instead of vacation. Is that a clue to me? Yeah, that's a clue to me. So I may very well have 2 dyslexics on my hands. If they have difficulty in learning and remembering names of letters in kindergarten, if they fail to understand that words are broken up into syllables and that syllables are broken up into sounds, phonemes. If they have a hard time grasping that, that is definitely a clue. And if they don't associate a letter with a sound, so if they see B and they can't associate B with it, that is a clue. And if they're unable to sound out simple words in kindergarten, words like dog, cat, hop, that is a clue as well. If they complain about how hard reading is, that is a clue. If they run away or hide when it's reading time, or if there's a history of reading difficulties in parents or siblings, those are all clues to dyslexia. Now, they do have strengths with their higher thinking skills, okay? They can see outside of the box. They have great curiosity and great imagination. They can figure things out on their own if you just leave them to it. They embrace new ideas easily. They understand the gist of things, and they understand new concepts. A lot of dyslexics also have surprising maturity. They have large vocabulary for their age. They are good at puzzles, and they show a talent for building models. Now, if you have a second grader or older, here are some clues that you should pay attention to. Do they mispronounce long, unfamiliar, or complicated words? Do they pause or hesitate in their speech? Do they use a lot of ums? That is that word retrieval. They're saying the as they're trying to get that word from their brain and out. Do they use imprecise language? Once again, saying stuff or things instead of the actual name of the object. Not being able to find the right word or confusing words that sound similar. Do they need extra time to produce an oral response? If you ask them a question, does it take them longer to reply to you? Do they have difficulty in remembering dates, names, telephone numbers? Those are all clues in second grade and above. However, even though they have a difficult time in remembering dates, names, telephone numbers, they remember concepts better than facts. Some more clues. Dyslexics are very slow, make very slow progress in acquiring new reading skills. They lack strategies to attack new or unfamiliar words. They don't have those word attack skills. They guess at reading unknown words. They skip those small function words of, at, the. They fear or don't want to read out loud. Their oral reading is choppy, labored, not smooth and fluent. If oral reading lacks inflection, if they are monotone, that is a clue. If they're better at reading words in context than isolated words, I've already touched on that. If they have poor performance on multiple choice tests, those actually are quite difficult for dyslexic kids. Here are some even more clues for you. If they're not able to finish their tests in time, that should be a clue. Most dyslexics require additional time for testing. Disastrous spelling. Some dyslexics can't even get close enough for spell check to help them. Reading that's slow and tiring. If they have trouble learning a foreign language, if their handwriting is super messy, if you have homework that never seems to end, that should be a clue for you too. It was in our case for sure. And if they don't enjoy reading, if they avoid reading for pleasure, if they have difficulty in memorizing math facts, that is actually part of it too. It's part of that retrieval process. And if they have problems with directionality, if they get lost easily, that is also a clue. Now, these older kids have strengths in higher thinking skills too. They excel at conceptualization, reasoning, imagination, abstract thinking. These are those sea of strengths. Their learning is accomplished through meaning, not through memorizing. If it's meaningful to them, they will learn it. They, however, will not just memorize it. These dyslexics see the big picture. They can see a project at its completion. They can see how it goes from being an idea to being complete and all of the steps in between. They can also see a project or something and they can turn it inside their head and see it from different angles as well. They have high levels of oral comprehension. If it's read to them, if they hear it, their comprehension is excellent. And they are also excellent in areas that don't rely on reading, things like math, computers, visual arts. And they're often extremely, and I do mean extremely, empathetic. They can understand how another person is feeling very, very easily. And a lot of them are also very good at reading body language and facial expressions. Clues in young adults and adults, if you're like wondering about yourself. If they have a difficult time with mispronunciation of names, of people and places. If they have difficulty remembering names. Oh, yeah. What was their name? I don't remember. If they say it's on the tip of my tongue, if they have trouble remembering the word that they want to use, that is a clue as well. If their spelling remains disastrous, if they hesitate to say a word that might be mispronounced because what if I say it wrong? If they have difficulty in learning a foreign language, if they don't read for pleasure, if reading still takes great effort, if they still lack fluency, if they frequently sacrifice social life for studying. Those are all clues. If they have a preference for books with a lot of white space, the higher level thinking skills and strengths in young adults and adults, more about those sea of strengths. They have a high learning capacity. They're exceptionally empathetic and warm with others. That empathy again. They have a noticeable improvement when given additional time on multiple choice tests because it's all of the reading that has to be done. If they're successful in areas not dependent on rote memorization, higher level maths as opposed to math facts. and if they have excellence in writing when content, not form, is important, when you're looking at ideas. And then, of course, that big picture thinking again. Okay, now know this. Dyslexia is a diagnosis. It's not a death sentence. There are many successful dyslexics out there. There are Nobel Prize winners, award-winning actors like Jennifer Aniston and Whoopi Goldberg. There are famous artists like Cher and athletes. There are famous authors, Henry Winkler. There's famous scientists. They say that Albert Einstein was dyslexic. And there are successful business owners. Many of the investors on Shark Tank are dyslexic as well. It's a diagnosis, not a death sentence. Thank you.